Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is an entitled people story. My late husband and I had a wonderful life together, and one of the many things we shared was a love of cars. He was particularly interested in Corvettes, and after he received a settlement of $30,000 from a car accident he was in during his senior year of high school, he was determined to buy one. However, his mother didn't think it was a wise choice and suggested that he invest the money in property instead. She made him a deal. He could buy a Corvette, but he would have to pay rent and storage fees for his other cars, or he could buy property and live at home rent-free for as long as he wanted. So, at 18 years old, we started looking for property to purchase. We found a stunning 10-acre lot for just $5,000, which we intended to build on someday or sell later down the road. In the early years, we would have huge parties on the property, enjoying the privacy and freedom of the rural surroundings. Over time, people started to buy and build on the lots surrounding ours. Zoning laws changed to allow one house per acre, but we still had plenty of land to ourselves. We didn't mind the neighbors, and the kids in the area loved to ride their dirt bikes on our property. We were happy to let them have fun and enjoy the land as we had. However, things took a turn for the worse when a new neighbor moved in and began making unreasonable demands. The woman would call us regularly to demand that we cut down trees that blocked her view, or to complain about the noise of the kids on their dirt bikes. She even got upset when people rode horses by her property because they made her dogs bark. One spring day, I went out to check on the property and noticed that the stream that ran across my land and the new neighbors had been dammed on my property and diverted about 50 yards from their property line. This had created a pond where it was blocked, and another at the bottom of the road, preventing me from accessing most of the property. I knew that it was their doing because the previous fall and winter, she had called to complain that my stream was causing her property to flood. However, her property didn't flood, and the stream had stayed within its banks for decades. Their lot had been heavily wooded, and they had cleared all the trees, causing any water issues they experienced to be their own doing. Furious at their actions, I took matters into my own hands and unblocked the stream using a small backhoe and some friends. The neighbor was livid and called the police, but we had done nothing wrong, and our friend who was an official at the Department of Ecology was able to explain the law to the cops. The neighbor ended up getting a citation for diverting and illegally altering the stream, and they had to put the stream bed back and revegetate with native plants and shrubs, which took away a portion of their yard. They were also fined a substantial amount of money. Despite this, the neighbor continued to find reasons to complain. She called the police multiple times to report the kids on dirt bikes using the pond we had inadvertently created when we unblocked the stream. We had concerns about liability if someone got hurt, but we also enjoyed making the neighbor angry, so we let the kids continue to ride. Fortunately, no one was ever injured. Years passed, and the neighbor continued to send texts and make phone calls to complain about various things. We began to have summer campout parties on the property, which always prompted calls to the police and fire department. But we never broke any laws, and we were never cited. Sadly, my husband passed away suddenly, and eventually, I decided to sell the property. I knew that I wasn't going to build a house there, so I listed it on the market for its market rate of $1 million. It was a 10-acre property, and zoning laws allowed for one house per acre, so it was a fair price. However, the neighbor was determined to ruin any potential sale. She would flag down potential buyers and tell them all sorts of nonsense about the property, claiming that it flooded and that it was unsuitable for building. It was frustrating, but I persevered. One day, I received an offer that was much lower than any of the others I had received. The couple who made the offer wanted to do an owner-carried contract for 3 years, with a balloon payment at the end. I wasn't interested in carrying the contract, but I agreed to meet with them at the property. When I arrived, the neighbor was there, telling the couple how terrible the property was. I was annoyed but didn't say anything. As we were talking, 2 little boys came flying up on dirt bikes, and the neighbor grabbed a rock and threw it at them. The couple was horrified, and the husband yelled at her to leave. He then apologized to me and explained that they had 2 young boys who loved to ride motocross, and they were looking for a property that would allow them to do so. He showed me where he wanted to build a track, and I knew he was the right buyer. I took a $250,000 loss on the sale, but I carried the contract just to spite the neighbor. Over the years, I've gone back to the property a few times to see how it's doing. The couple built a beautiful house at the farthest point from the neighbor, and they have a massive track on the property. The neighbor still sends me nasty texts, but I just ignore them. It's been 6 years since I sold the property, and I have no regrets. I know that my husband would be proud of me for standing up to that petty, vindictive neighbor and for finding a buyer who would love the property as much as we did. The next story is titled "Can't Take Lunch Because of Training?" I don't think so. In my mid-20s I worked for a multinational accounting firm. I have always had a real firm policy for standing up when something doesn't sound right, irrelevant if it puts me in an awkward position. This story is how I maliciously complied and in turn made my director learn a lesson I hope she won't forget. We'll call her Karen, not her real name. Background on Karen. When she joined the team we all liked her, she made great changes and we got on well with her. But the moment she was promoted to director and had direct reporting to the partner, she flipped. Became a complete different person and made our life hell. Previously she spent her career heading up call centers, which was really evident in her management style, and for some reason made it her mission to cut costs in the team and go under budget. This affected everything from telling us we didn't have a stationary budget for pens and had to take from other team stores to only allowing a one drink, one course policy on team dinner events. This was a huge company and other teams around us would go for fancy all expenses paid social events, so we felt pretty put out. Her cost cutting also extended to things like no overtime approvals unless way in advance. That didn't last long as we were understaffed, so quickly emergencies weren't dealt with, and hiring school leavers instead of graduates as they were cheaper, despite the work needing more experience. Her favorite saying to everything was, "It's policy," or blaming HR or higher-ups, saying whatever new thing, even if a new irrelevant spreadsheet, would come from HR. Honestly, the amount of time HR spent on our lil team in a company with 20k plus UK employees was astounding. Then came the day she booked an all-day training session from some external company to show us how to use a new system. She went on about it for weeks. Was super excited that she had brought in this new system. The training was intense, so freaking technical, mind-numbing and most of all expensive. So what would normally be covered over a few days was crammed into one full day. They were paid hourly. Shock. She sent an email advising how we're expected to attend. It will go through the whole day and lunch would be provided, but it will be a working lunch, so training would also be through lunch. Needless to say, the thought of sitting in a stuffy room for 8 hours without a lunch break wasn't appealing. I asked for an exception as I really relied on going outside for the hour at lunch for a break. I was in the midst of high anxiety at the time and my breaks got me through. She said it's policy that we would be expected to change our workday around to fit training, and there is no policy that requires her to allow me to go out. If I had an issue, I should check the HR manual. I think until now, this statement usually worked for her as no one really ever checked. I went one better. I went to our Q malicious compliance. Using the effective wording of, "for my mental health and well-being," HR replied, and of course disagreed as UK law mandates training as work, and an 8-hour day requires at least 1 hour break, which I am allowed to choose what I do with. They CC'd Karen. Karen backed down but verbally told me it was an exception for me and to not share with the rest of the team. Of course I didn't comply, she was breaking the law. So I showed the email chain to everyone as they were complaining about the same thing. So me and the rest of the team came up with a lil plan. Sandwiches were delivered, budget sandwiches of course, from the supermarket down the road. Instead of our slightly more expensive internal catering team who caters for this exact type of thing for our 10-floor building. I stood up and announced I was going on lunch and would be back in an hour. Cue the rest of the team, all 12, standing up after me. Karen goes, "Where are you all going?" To which someone replied, "I understand that HR said we were allowed to leave the room for the hour for lunch." The look on her face. She knew she was stuck. She couldn't say anything. We left her in there alone with the 2 trainers who seemed to guess something was up. I've never felt more satisfied in my life. We all had a good laugh about it outside. I think I even did a happy dance. She also knew she couldn't complain to me about it, as that would highlight her breaking the rules. I felt like I was walking on air all day. After this, there was much less blaming of HR, and generally she was a little skittish around me because she knew I didn't take her crap and would call her out. A second training session had to be booked since the training would never have worked in one day. There were lots of moans and groans about how expensive the extra training session costs, of course. I left a couple of months afterwards, and so did pretty much the rest of my team, replaced by school leavers, of course. But I'm very glad I complied. I believe Karen still works there, but for a much smaller team. The next story is titled "My Mom Gave Me Up for $2,500. So, backstory. My mom and dad split up when I was roughly 9/10 of a year old due to my mother cheating on my father when he was out of the country. He's a pilot. At the time, it was me and my 2 older sisters, one of which was already an adult. So my other sister and I were left under my mother's custody due to my father always flying and not wanting us to go through moving all the time. As far as the details go, my dad not only paid my mom child support but also paid off the house. Despite having little money to take care of himself, he paid my mom more than what he actually owed. Yet, my sister and I never saw that money. After the divorce, my mom turned to many things: sleeping around, gambling, drinking, and eventually meth, though that didn't last long due to my dad finding out and threatening to take us away. My sister practically became my mother since ours decided to step down from the plate and I was too young to take care of myself. When my sister left for college, all the emotional abuse she took ended up falling on me, which sent me into a loop. Due to my sister taking all the damage, I typically saw my mother as, well, my mother. My young brain didn't notice how often she didn't come home at night, or the lack of food in the house, or the constant weeks I'd wear one outfit since I didn't have other clothes that fit. I didn't notice how not normal this is. Heading into high school, it became more and more obvious this wasn't right at all, yet I still loved my mother. We bantered and ate fast food together and she was proud of my accomplishments. But she had her moments, dropping huge hints that I'm too boyish like my dad, refusing to let me cut my hair, pressuring me into wearing makeup, heels, dresses, convincing me I don't need therapy as my therapist at the time made me uncomfortable, one of those Christian therapists that made everything about God. While I am a Christian, it didn't help the conversation, and so on. Meanwhile, my dad met a woman and they fell in love. When she became pregnant with his kid, he moved her to America after my little sister was born and started a new family. I love my stepmom, she's literally the sweetest woman I know. And I adore my baby sister, and eventually my second baby sister. Over time, after spending many nights in their home, I came to realize how much happier I was at their house over my mother's. One day, I told my dad I want to officially live with him. At this point in time, I've noticed how depressed I am and how things aren't normal in my mom's house. When I told my mother this, she was deeply upset and cried, but she understood, or so I thought. That's when everything went downhill. The text messages started, sly guilt trips and remarks on how someone else convinced me to move out, that my father convinced me she was the bad guy. The more these texts happened, the warier I became on talking to her. It got to the point where I would cry after every conversation because I was so confused and lost. One day, she practically trapped me in her car in my best friend's driveway to tell me how my reasons for leaving her were bullcrap and that I clearly don't remember what it was like in that house. Cue my memory issues. But enough about that. Let's get to the good part, the custody case. Due to me being the last child between my mother and father, my dad no longer had to pay child support. Obviously, they go to court about this. Except my mom didn't show up. For many, many hearings. When she did, she had this bullcrap story about how my dad owed her a crapload of money because he never paid the full child support, how she felt pressured to believe him and trust him when he said he knew how much he owed her. He did. He calculated it himself and actually paid more than what was needed. So, if you're catching on, this fight was about money. Here's a fun little thing. My mom texted me maybe a month before this case started about how she desperately wants me to come home, how she will do anything to get her baby back. That aged well, didn't it? Because one day, my mom stated that if my dad pays her $2,500, she will give up full custody of me. My dad agreed to it and it was over. She gave up her custody rights for $2,500. It still stings. I'm still bitter and angry to this day about it, and this case happened years ago. I don't think my mom is aware I know the details on this case, as she, very rarely, reaches out to me as if we still have a relationship to tell me how much she loves and misses me. The thing is, I learned that my mom actually despised me after the divorce because I reminded her of my dad. We have the same eyes and resting face lol. My mom just loves being the victim and even tried to convince my sister she doesn't remember doing all the stuff she did to us. She even blamed my dad for her cheating on him and said so to my face. I haven't had a real conversation with her since Christmas, over the phone OFC, and haven't seen her in person since maybe before the pandemic. She texted me recently all excited about a gift she got for my sister's unborn baby, and it sent a whole new wave of resentment towards her. I stopped trying long ago to have a relationship with her, as she doesn't try in return and will continue to do so until she admits her wrongs, apologizes, and actually tries to be a ducking mother for once in her life. Until then, my only mother is my lovely stepmom. The next story is titled "Customer Wants to Steal Something Instead of Doing a Return." I was at my register and this woman came into the store with a tool in her hand. She came up to me and told me that she had just bought the tool for her husband, but she got the wrong tool by accident. She showed me her receipt and asked if she could put the tool she bought back on the shelf and grab the tool she needed to get. Let me repeat myself. She had bought the wrong thing on accident and, instead of returning the thing she bought and buying the thing she needed, she wanted to take the other thing without paying for it, and she thought it was okay if she left the other thing even though the two were likely different prices. I politely told her that she was going to have to go to customer service and do a return. At the store I work at, we can't do returns at our registers. It annoys customers all the time. She looked at me and said, "But customer service isn't doing anything." I don't know what she meant. My best guess is customer service was slow or busy. I reiterated and she says, "So I'm going to have to wait in line." I respond with, "Unfortunately. Sorry about that." She rolls her eyes at me and walks away. I know returning stuff can be a hassle, but what am I supposed to say? Take whatever you want, Your Majesty, we don't need to worry about inventory. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comments.